Weather forecast. There is one app I really like for weather forecast, and it's called Windy. So you can use it as an app, or you can just go to windy.com in your web browser and use it in the web browser on a bigger screen. And what it does, it simply shows you a map with the wind as these animated arrows and the colors indicating the strength. And down here you have a time slider where you can choose the point of time. And how it works is you zoom into the region you're interested in, like here, and then place that cursor on the point you want to get the forecast for, and it shows you 11 knots and the direction, and then here you can choose the time. But if you just tap on forecast for this region, you get a forecast, time view, and this color tells you the strength of the wind, and then you can scroll through, select any point in time, and see this animation and the strength of the wind. So this is already pretty handy. It also shows you the temperature and if it might rain or if it is cloudy. And in the subscription, in the Pro version, if you pay for it, you can switch to hourly forecast. So okay, there are other apps out there that do this as well, like Wind Finder. But I think the killer feature of this app is that you can compare different models. So down here you can select different forecast models and compare what their forecast is, but you can also compare them directly if you go to more and compare forecasts. So now you can look at all the different forecasts simultaneously and see if they match or if they don't. So that gives you a hint on how reliable that forecast is. And if you scroll to the very end of each row, then you see a description of that, what that model actually is, where it comes from, where the data comes from. And the GFS, the Global Forecast Model by the US NOAA, it's a free global model, but it's pretty coarse, and a lot of services that are freely available on the internet rely on this. So it gives you a general hint on how the wind is, but then often people complain, the forecast, it's not that precise. Yeah, and of course it's not, because they are relying on the Global Forecast Model. And especially for Europe, this ECMWF model is really good, but it's a private company that runs this simulation, and it's not free. So some apps provide it for free, like Windy, and you also, of course, in the paid version it's included. So this is, in my opinion, for Europe, much more reliable than the Global Forecast Model. And then there are some other regional models that are interesting. Meteoblue, I've no experience with it. I think this is a Swiss model. I think this is more interesting for air gliding and stuff in the mountains, not for sailing. Then of course we have the ICON model. They have a very high resolution, it's called ICON D2 model by the German weather service. And for the long-term forecast they also have an ICON EU. It automatically switches between these two models. And there's Arome by the French Met Office, so that's I think good for France. And then there's this UKV by the UK Met Office, which is I think good for UK Island and the North Sea, of course. So in the Netherlands, I think you can use these global, you can use everywhere, but it's not that accurate. But this European model is quite good. I think the German one still applies there, and the UK forecast is pretty good. And down here you can switch the display, or let's have a look at what it shows you first. Of course it shows you the time, so the day and the hour, and temperature, conditions like clouds or rain. Then in millimeters down here you have the forecasted precipitation, and then you have the wind speed, the nominal wind speed, and the gusts. So then you can see how gusty it actually is, and then this little arrow indicating the direction of the wind. So if you now switch to the wind view down here, you get a dense comparison of all the models available. So that quickly allows you to judge how reliable the forecast is. And my personal experience is that if you have this 1 hour resolution, it sometimes really matches accurately. I had situations where there was no wind, but I looked into the forecast and it says, okay, in 3 hours the wind will pick up. And it actually did. So there was no reason to switch on the engine. Just wait if the tide allows. So I had these situations in the Baltic Sea, so there was no tide, so no problem. Just waiting and having a coffee and wait until the wind picks up. And you saw all the other boats motoring along. We just waited 3 hours and then the wind picked up and we had a wonderful sail into the evening. Okay, this is what it can do, and it also can show you this meteogram, which shows you how the clouds in the atmosphere are stacked with low clouds, high clouds, and the expected precipitation levels. And there's also a wave forecast. And if you selected a model that contains wave information, then you see here you have the wind speed and gusts, and you also have the waves, where you have the wind waves and the swell. So and then you can just move that around and see how the sea condition is like, and it also tells you the direction of the swell and the wave. So this is, I think, pretty interesting if you want to tack into the wind, and if you have the swell also against you, then you probably wait or do something else. So here you can see the waves, like swell 1, swell 2, wind waves. So this is pretty interesting for the forecast, and the killer feature is that you can actually compare different models. So this makes the thing much more reliable than using a single source or just only using GFS model. But it can do more. Since the latest update, they added a nice feature which is called route planning. So I will demonstrate it here. So you select the starting point, like here, and then you go to distance and planning, and then you trace out a route, just for fun here around the island quickly. So, and back, and then you say, okay, boating. And what it does now, it calculates the distance for the entire trip, and it shows you the forecast along this route. And if you enter a speed of the boat, like let's say we estimate we're going 4 knots average, then it also calculates the duration, and here you can select the starting point, and then it shows you the wind speed along this track. So then you can click here somewhere and it will show you where on the track you are at this instant, and it will show you the wind information for just this point in time. So this way you can really use this to plan an entire trip, which direction is the right way to go, or also for departure planning. So you can move this along and see when is the most favorable wind. So what we see here is, of course, again, temperature, precipitation, wind and gusts, and the wind direction. And this arrow is a bit complicated to read because there's no explanation to it. And it is the wind relative to your boat, and the nose of the boat is pointing right. So that means this way you have your beam reaching with wind from starboard. And if you look into the graph, that actually is true here. And the arrow turns red if you get the wind on the nose. So in this situation there, you need to tack because you have the wind right on the nose, and then on this leg you get going to a broad reach. Then you just here you are running, and then here, yeah, you get here on a close reach. So that's really handy for planning a trip. So this is why I really like this app. And there are more layers. It's not only wind. You can, in this layer tab, you can enable this weather radar. So you can look at 2 regions where clouds and showers are going on and how they develop and move. So to estimate if you get wet. And there's also satellite image available with animation. And if you're doing offshore passages, then you're also interested in waves. And here you also have a wave view, which shows you an animation of how the waves are traveling and how big they are. So you can actually click into this forecast, and then you see the wave forecast for this region. There's also information about currents. So it includes currents induced by wind and also tidal currents. So if you slowly move, so it does not work for tidal currents behind the islands, but on these bigger scales it's actually nice because you can scroll through it hour by hour, and then you see this tidal wave, how it runs through the North Sea. Here it's coming up. How strong the currents are and when they shift. But you have to be a bit careful. I think this current information and the heights of the tides. There's an experimental feature, I think, for tide forecasts. Here you can switch. So there are some stations where you can see the level of the tide. So it's here it's low water, then it's rising tide, high tide, and then you can actually click on the station, and then you get these the water levels and times displayed. But this feature is experimental, so you have to be careful. These might not be correct. So better use the official sources for this. But somehow it's included there. So all in all, I really like this app. Report Wind you can also switch on. There are some, see the forecast, and at the same time you see what some stations out there that report wind measurements are actually reporting. They can compare the values from the forecast for the current time to what was reported and measured here. So this is my favorite app for doing weather planning. Windy, can recommend it.